Hi y'all! My name is Brooke and I'm here to welcome you back to Band Brooke, and today I am going to be starting a new series on my channel, and it's going to be called the SHTF Stories series. What does SHTF stand for, you ask? If you're a prepper or a survivalist, you might know. It means shit hits the fan. So what's a shit hits the fan story? Well, it's a story about any kind of unexpected, dire emergency situation that turns someone's life upside down. We're talking things like societal collapse, financial collapse or ruin. We're talking EMPs, pandemics. We are talking things like major natural disasters, and the list goes on. Why am I going to be focused so much on these stories on my channel for the foreseeable future? Well, in March 2020, everyone's world turned upside down with this pandemic, and I started thinking about these survival stories as a way to sort of navigate through unknown territory myself. I was looking at the psychology of how people dealt with the unexpected in books and movies and television shows. I was looking at how group dynamics formed or broke apart during emergency situations, and the way that we treat each other during disaster and how it might change, and how we ourselves might be altered or changed by the circumstances that we are going through. And it's been kind of an interesting thought experiment. That said, while it has been strangely comforting for me, I realized that that might be the equivalent of doom watching or doom reading for other people. And so I think you have to know what your threshold is for stories about difficult situations when we are living through difficult situations right now. This is a booktube channel, but I'm also going to be talking about television shows and movies where shit hits the fan because of some of the really phenomenal screenwriting that I have encountered while I have been spending way too much time on the couch in front of Netflix and Hulu. But I want to open this series with a very particular book, and that is Leave the World Behind by Rumaan, who is an author of Bangladeshi descent, who is also known for books like Rich and Pretty. This is the first book of his that I have read, and I absolutely loved it. 5 stars, devoured it, could not recommend more, with a couple caveats that I'll talk about later on. So before we jump into what I liked about this book, maybe what didn't work as much for me, I'm going to give you a synopsis, but I'm going to be spoiler free. So this book starts off not as a disaster novel, but as a vacation novel. Your two main characters are Amanda and Clay. They are a couple that's probably in their late 30s, early 40s that have teenagers that are in middle school and high school. And they are tired, y'all. They are in the middle of the hustle and bustle of New York City. They have demanding jobs. They have children that need them. They are always answering to or for something, right? They have a lot that they're responsible for. So they decide that they are going to enjoy some rest and relaxation by renting out an Airbnb that's described online as a place where you can leave the world behind, hence the title. And this is an idyllic rural area in Long Island, and I believe it's in Hamptons adjacent territory, but don't quote me on that because I am a very middle-class Southerner that doesn't know a lot about real estate for affluent Northern folks. But anyway, it's in that area of the world. So they go up to Long Island and they are fully enjoying everything that vacation has to offer. They are enjoying the pool, the hot tub, they're going to the beach, and indulging in a lot of life's simple pleasures. And one of the things that I love about Alam's writing is he really is able to capture on page the different almost animal impulses that we have as people that have to live and move and breathe inside our bodies, these bodies that have impulses that control us. So for example, Clay is a smoker, and it talks about him sneaking outside to have a smoke away from his kids. And the way that Alam writes those cigarette breaks makes my former smoker brain hanker for some nicotine. He also talks about vacation intimacy, we'll say, in an interesting way, because he talks about how, you know, there's that idea of what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Same thing for the Hamptons. What you do while you're on vacation doesn't count. So if you are prim and proper with your partner at home, you don't have to be on vacation because you get to escape. It doesn't count. if you're animalistic and wild. He talks about the cravings that people have for certain kinds of rich or indulgent or decadent foods and what it feels like to lay on the beach and feel the sun hit your skin. He talks in a way that is so grounded in our senses that I could feel myself on this vacation along with this family, because he really knows how to capture the things that we crave and make the reader crave them too, right? And vacation is sort of the perfect place for this book to happen because these characters are sinking into what Alam calls their lizard brains. You know, they are just enjoying their bodies, they're enjoying being one with their surroundings out in nature at this beautiful locale, and their sense of urgency does not exist. Their guard is totally down. Life is good. But then the shit hits the fan. And this is not a spoiler, it's inside the book jacket, but everything is fine until one night after their kids go to sleep and they're curled up on the couch together watching television, they hear a rap on the door. They go to answer it. It's very late at night, probably around midnight, and they see two elderly strangers that they have never met before. And they introduce themselves as GH and Ruth, and they claim that they are the owners of this vacation estate, and that they realize that they did rent it out to Amanda and Clay, but they really need to stay there for the night because there's an emergency that has broken loose in New York City and it's not safe to be there anymore. So some prying, Amanda and her husband start to try to peel away the layers, see if, you know, this is really an actual emergency or if they're being conned. And the couple says, you know, there was a grid down situation in New York City, all the power went out, the city plunged into darkness and chaos, and it wouldn't be safe to drive back to our apartment in Manhattan because all of the stoplights are out, you know, the roads are chaos. So we just decided to drive to the country where we knew that we wouldn't have to deal with that and sort of hunker down here. We can stay downstairs, or we have an in-law suite. You'll never know that we're here. We'll leave you alone and we'll give you some money back to make up for troubling you with our presence unexpectedly on your vacation. He's not sure if they're buying it or not. You know, they were watching television, their power is on, everything was fine, so they start to check. Is their Wi-Fi working? Is the television still on? What can they find out from the outside world? And soon they realize something did happen, but there's no real information about what it was, and they're still not sure that Ruth and GH are who they say they are, even though there are some hints that they probably do own the property. So this couple has to choose whether or not they take the elderly couple in, and the story goes from there. Everywhere I looked, this was listed as a thriller, but I think that that is grossly miscategorized. I think if people go in and they expect a thriller, they are going to feel let down. I feel like this book really fits more into the slow burn horror category because the way that this messes with you psychologically has to mostly do with slow building dread, where the main characters are becoming more and more unnerved as they try to confront unknown situations. I read this book last week and I finished reading it on January 6th, which is when we had rioters that were trying to get into the Capitol building. And that night when I was reading, there was a particular passage that really spoke to how I feel about what's going on in the world and how frustrating uncertainty is when you realize that you are now in a world that you don't have a roadmap to navigate, when you don't know what's behind the locked door, or in the particular case of the news that I was watching, if the people behind barricaded walls were okay, you know. But anyway, this is a quote from the book that I feel like a lot of people that are watching will probably identify with. It says, "She had learned only one thing from the current reality, and it was that everything held together by tacit agreement that it would. All it took to unravel something was one party deciding to do just that. There was no real structure to prevent chaos. There was only a collective faith in order." This book really gets to the vulnerability that we all experience when we realize that things are not going to be spelled out for us the way that we want them to be when things are changing rapidly and we don't know what's going on and the world is not as we expected it to be in times of emergency and situations like this. So this book feels really timely for that reason. There were also some other things that felt very timely about this book, and one is the way that it approaches racism and bias, both conscious and unconscious bias, throughout the entirety of the text. So one thing I have failed to mention is that Amanda and Clay, the young couple, are white. The couple that appears at the door happen to be African American. And there is a moment where Amanda catches herself because when Ruth and GH say that they are the owners, she has this moment where she thinks, okay, but I did not expect a property like this to be owned by African Americans. And she quickly, realizes I shouldn't have thought that and kicks herself mentally. But she has a lot of moments throughout the book that are like that, where she catches herself thinking that things that she's not supposed to think, that she would never admit to out loud, but that flavor her behavior when she's interacting with this couple and trying to figure out whether or not to trust them. And I think that race relations are interesting when you think about emergency situations, because in an emergency, sometimes you have a very short period of time to figure out who you can trust and who you can't. And sometimes our gut feelings are not grounded in good things. Sometimes we need to challenge our way of thinking because of the societal racism, structural racism that we have been exposed to our entire lives. We have to make sure that we are not making unfair assumptions about people in moments of heightened emotion and crisis, right? So this book, I think, really was an interesting way to explore that. It also explored class and gender and things like that in ways that I thought were interesting. So for example, in this book, there is a particular character who is a carpenter and a contractor. And he has renovated this home and put in all these lush finishes and made it really just a sight to behold, the vacation-worthy place that people wanted to flock to, right? And certain characters in this book look at him and they see that he is this sort of ideal of masculinity. He has broad shoulders, he has a barrel chest, he has, the salt and pepper silver fox hair, and he is good with his hands. So when the world kind of falls to crumbles, people look to him in the absence of a leader because they think, this is a very manly man. He is capable, he can do things, he can tell me what I am supposed to do when I'm not sure what my next step should be. And so there are a lot of little moments like that where in the absence of a leader, people make assumptions about who they should or should not turn to. Another thing that Alam does that I thought was really interesting and timely was he explored the sacrifices people are and are not willing to make, who they will make them for, and that final straw where someone says, you know what, I have done as much for you as I can, I'm washing my hands, this is as far as I can go, you're on your own. And the reason that that's interesting to me is that I have relatives that are in the medical community, and there has been talk about how there's some infighting inside the medical community about who should be the first in line to be vaccinated, and some anger towards perhaps colleagues that were vaccinated first by those that weren't as heavily prioritized. And in emergency situations, we most need to be our highest and most evolved self, but it's easiest to regress to being our lowest selves, to being selfish in our fear and greedy because we want to exercise control over something, right? And in this book, there are no vaccines. This isn't a book about a pandemic, but there are people that are trying to figure out who has a greater stake to the safety of this home that they both want to occupy, right? And there are moments that you see Amanda and Clay be very selfish, but then they are gripped by terror for their children and they redirect their thinking because all that matters to them when they remember who they are, who they're supposed to be, is their kids, making sure their kids are okay. Making sure that your child crying in that immediate moment is more important than the uncertainties of the outside world, that sonic boom you heard, whatever it is that is happening that you can't explain. And then Ruth in this book is a grandmother, and when she is interacting with Amanda and Amanda's family, when she is kind to them, it is grounded in reminding herself that she has a family out there and she wants someone else to be good to them. She's not good to them because she wants to be, she's good to them because she is hoping someone will be good to her grandsons and to her daughter. And there's a lot of that in this book. People struggling with this battle between being truly moral or coming across as moral because that's how they want to be seen, right? Sometimes their actions and their motivations don't exactly line up together. So it was really interesting getting inside the characters' heads. And that's one thing I will say about this book is that there is a ton of head hopping. I could be butchering this, but I think this is third person omniscient. You get back and forth between people's point of view. You're in and out of everyone's minds. So you see the good, the bad, the ugly in all of them. And they're all really well fleshed out, interesting, messy, but mostly sympathetic characters, which I don't think that you get a lot of in thriller horror territory. So that was kind of a refreshing treat, even though sometimes I wanted to shake Amanda. While I am not a parent, I really enjoyed the way Alam explored how parents decided what and what not to tell their kids. So in this book, there is a girl that is in middle school, I believe, and there is a 15-year-old boy. And they know that their kids are smart and capable, but they're not sure how much to tell them about what is going on. Remember, they know very little themselves, but they're trying to shield their kids from the thought that something big and bad is happening in the world beyond the land that they're on. And you know, this is interesting to me because when you raise kids, you shield them from certain ideas, certain harmful realities, certain types of language, those kinds of things. And over the course of their youth, you get to slowly dole out information as you deem it fit or palatable. But in an emergency situation, you don't have the luxury of that time, and you have to make split-second decisions about what you tell your kids, you know, about the monster under the bed or the monster outside. So as someone that doesn't have kids but is hoping to bring some into the world soon, that's something that I really thought a lot about and got a lot out of. You know, if I had a child now, I don't know what I would tell them about COVID. I don't know what I would tell them about what happened in the Capitol building, right? And then I have just one final observation about this book that doesn't have anything to do with the emergency at the heart of the story. And that's that I love the way that this author talks about food. There is an entire chapter, chapter 3, that is specifically dedicated to what Amanda buys at the grocery store. I'll give you just a snippet. It says, she bought yogurt and blueberries. She bought sliced turkey, whole grain bread, that pebbly mud-colored mustard and mayonnaise. She bought potato chips and tortilla chips and jarred fruit salsa full of cilantro, even though Archie refused to eat cilantro. She bought organic hot dogs and inexpensive buns and the same ketchup everyone bought. She bought cold hard lemons and seltzer and Tito's vodka and 2 bottles of $9 wine. She bought dried spaghetti and salted butter and a head of garlic. And it goes on and on for an entire chapter. And there were people that complained about that on the reviews in Goodreads, but I loved it. And it might just be because I am food obsessed. I love to cook, I love to eat. I'm starting to love to bake, mostly because of the pandemic and the whole bread craze. But I think that you can learn so much from a character about what kind of food they buy, how they prepare it, who they break their bread with, what kinds of things are deemed as cause for celebration, when they break out the fancy wine or the Tito's vodka, right? Like there's so much to be learned from that about someone's socioeconomic status because of the food they can afford. There's something to be learned about the kinds of things someone is willing to splurge on. You learn about someone's environment from reading about the way they prepare food, the space they prepare their food in, their culture, their religion, if they have certain kinds of dietary restrictions. You learn so much. And so I loved the way Alam talked about food. It made me want to eat guacamole and drink rum and just have a good time on a pool deck somewhere. This book will make you feel very much in your body. It will make you hungry. It will make you scared. It will give you chills. It will do all the things. So anyway, I recommend this book. I said that I recommended it with a caveat at the beginning though, and that is that this book has a very open and vague ending that you have to make sense of for yourself. The author does not give you neat explanations. He does not tell you how things end. So if that is something that bothers you, maybe don't read this. Otherwise, definitely pick it up. So in the comments below, I would love to know if you are reading any books about emergency or survival type situations. And I would also love to know if there are books, movies, or television shows that you would like me to review as a part of this. I'm thinking the next thing that I will be talking about for Shit Hits the Fan is the show Jericho. Until next time, happy reading. Bye y'all.